Well, I'm glad to see Dr. McDonald coming to the platform because his plane has been several hours late, and he's a personal friend of Dr. Grant's, and I know that we'll look forward to hearing Dr. McDonald's introduction of Dr. Grant. Dr. McDonald comes from Atlanta, Georgia, and is an eminent physician and a great friend of ours and sponsor of our rally, and it was with great pleasure I present Dr. Lawrence McDonald. Thank you. So glad to see you.
Ms. McKinney. Our next speaker is a native Georgian who was born in Decatur County. He received his elementary and high school education in Georgia public schools and then completed 2 years in study in business at the Savannah State College. This was followed 4 years study with a music major at Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Georgia. Graduate work was performed at Atlanta University, University of Indiana, and Ohio State University. He holds the AS 6-year certificate in supervision and administration for the state of Georgia, with terminal work being performed at the University of Georgia. Honorary degrees include Doctor of Divinity from Morris Brown College, Doctor of Laws from Union Baptist College Seminary, and Certificate of Merit from Georgia State Teachers Association. Our speaker has been an active churchman, having pastored some of the largest churches in the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Georgia, and served as the presiding elder of the Bainbridge District. In the academic area, he has served as principal of 3 of Georgia's largest combined high schools, and has been also chairman of the music department of Savannah State College and band director of Albany State College. His associations and memberships are too numerous to detail. However, they include Phi Beta Sigma, the Authors Guild, Composers Guild, and Executive Board of Morris Brown College. In 1956, he authored a very interesting book entitled When the Melon is Ripe, dealing with communist infiltration into the civil rights movement, and particularly into the Negro community. This was published by the Exposition Press in New York City, in New York. He is married and is also father of 4 charming daughters, 2 of whom are teaching today in Atlanta. Currently, he is president of Daniel Payne College in Birmingham, Alabama. This college is over 80 years old, and with the help of some good people in the city of Birmingham, is soon to move its campus to a new location in that lovely town, lovely city, and is undertaking a multi-million-dollar building program. It is a distinct pleasure for me to introduce to his second New England Rally for God, Family, and Country, Dr. Daniel Grant. His topic is to be the hidden agenda for moral and ethical leadership for Black America and the nation. Dr. Grant.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. To Colonel Bunker, chairman of this great occasion, Ms. McKinley, executive secretary, and to all of you. First, may I express my appreciation to you and the sponsors of this New England Rally for God, Family, and Country for inviting me here today. Today, I have an audience that I feel know and well understand the problems that plague America. Times really have changed. When I was a boy, I was called a colored boy. When I was in college, I was called a Negro. As times elapsed, I was called an Afro-American, and today I am called a Black American. Whatever it may be, one thing I am sure of is that I am human, a Christian, an Alabamian by the way of Georgia, an American citizen, and a conservative. I was born a conservative. My father and grandfather were conservatives. The English language is of such that one can become confused even if his mother tongue, so to speak, was English. This within itself determines our values. Most of you have heard about the cat that went to see the Queen. Miss Cat didn't see anything under the Queen's chair other than a rat. She didn't see those golden slippers or ermine robe, nor did she see the Queen's throne. She had cat values. Some time ago I heard of a rich widow that bought a little pig. She kept him clean and even sprayed him with expensive perfume. Daily she kept him tied with a beautiful ribbon around his neck and one on his tail. One evening while walking the beautiful little pig around in the flower garden, the pig focused his attention to a mud hole in the ditch. Before she could realize what was happening, this little pig had broken out of her grasp and plunged into the ditch. There he lived happily ever after. He had pig values. There are fundamental principles and values that all men, not even mentioning lower animals, must hold to if he is to survive. Change is all right, yes, but from what to what? That's the big question. My subject, hidden agenda for moral and ethical leadership for Black America and the nation. More than 2 decades ago, it was an honor as well as a privilege for me to serve as principal of a model high school in Americus, Georgia, the A.S. Staley High School. This school was named in the honor of an outstanding Negro educator. During those days, Staley was not only considered as a model or an example of a good school for Negroes, but it was well built and equipped far better than several white high schools in surrounding counties. Dr. Robert L. Cousins, who recently retired as assistant director for the Southern Association, Atlanta, Georgia, was at that time director of Negro education in the state of Georgia. It was he who had recommended me for the principalship along with 2 other aspirants. I wonder sometime at this late date as to why I was selected out of the 3 for the principalship by the superintendent. My tenure there was only 5 years, but those years were jammed with many exasperating moments. It was there that I gained a new perspective on life. Because of those turbulent years, and after having kept hidden within myself unexplained emotions as well as experiences, I wrote my first book, When the Melon is Ripe. Had I not edited this book, probably I would have spent the rest of my life in a mental institution. All of those mysterious experiences could not have remained hidden in my mind. I was discussing my experience with Dr. J.W. Holly, the founder of the Albany State College, Albany, Georgia. It was he that had written several books, one the most popular, You Can't Build a Chimney from the Top. He said the best way to get things like that out of your mind is to share those experiences with others, that is, by writing a book. For 3 years, the book was in the making. Since I was an unknown and a poorly paid principal, made it difficult for me to publish a book. Therefore, it was necessary to borrow money from a local bank, the Pelham Banking Company, and use my salary as security. Immediately after the book was published, I received a large number of telegrams, letters, and all kind of insults. Of course, that didn't worry me too much because I had written about more horrible experiences than the messages were. One writer wrote on the editorial page of the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer, quote, strange story told by Negro teacher. He continued, a strange book to hand when the melon is ripe. An autobiography. Grant tells of a water boy who carried a bottle of gin on his hip, and it makes an amusing episode. But basically, it is a grim account. There are mysterious hints at unidentified enemies, and one might suspect that Grant has a persecution complex, although the suspicion might not arise had he spelled out his troubles in more detail. 2, it is a strange account. The cloak and daggerish aspects are a little hard to accept. But if Grant has information on a conspiracy operating in Georgia and stirring up the trouble, he related, why then there are some authorities who would like to have it, end quote. The article is typical of several that were published. Dr. S. Randolph Edmonds, Florida A&M University, reviewed the book for the Pittsburgh Courier. His title, Where There Is Smoke. Quote, truth is indeed stranger than fiction, is the general reaction one receives after reading Daniel T. Grant's absorbing and highly controversial autobiography. Mr. Grant relates one realistic yet fantastic incident after incident in his efforts to guide the youth and community of Americas away from the evil forces which constantly and unrelentingly dogged his administration as principal of the A.S. Staley High School. The author made the mistake of making his opposition too bad to be convincing. There is no philosophy to guide beginning principals faced with similar problems. He evidences little of the Christian spirit of forgiveness for his enemies. Where there is smoke, there may only be a smoke bomb, but from the Reverend Mr. Grant's own story, one cannot help but feel that there must be a few sparks against him, end quote. Of course, I saw him a few months later, and he said, Grant, you really had a very good book, but you know I was paid to review your book. After reading When the Melon is Ripe, one can easily see as well as understands the reason for the above articles. For instance, chapter 1 is titled, Something Lurks Beneath the Surface. The chapter begins thus. Strange as it seems, a few days before my departure for Americas, a strange incident occurred. I was sitting in the lounge in Atlanta University's dining hall when a young lady told me that someone outside would like to see me. I remember very distinctly. The time was nearing for my appointment with a professor. As I walked down the steps and was looking for my visitor, someone touched me on the shoulder and directed me to a man across the street. Standing on the other side was a neatly dressed character with a dynamic personality. He shook my hand and introduced himself as a representative from a well-known book concern. He asked if I would mind sitting in the car out of the sun, but I told him that I had an appointment with a few minutes. He apologized for detaining me and suggested that he would drive me over to the administration building. On our way over to the building, he talked about the weather and things in general. We sat in the car for 15 minutes, and my strange visitor said at once, "Where will you be working next term?" I said, "Americas." "Fine," he said. "I will send one of our representatives down to see you. I understand there are some fine citizens in Americas, Georgia. Do you know Mr. X there?" I said, "No, I don't." "Well," he said, "you will meet him. Our man will be there when the melon is ripe." He shook my hand, and as I was letting go, a $10 bill was forced between my fingers. He said compliments of the company. I was taken by surprise as he bade me goodbye. He was one of medium height, blond, with an unusual accent not commonly heard in the South. When the melon is ripe, those few words have haunted me since. Had I known what fate had in store for me when I left Atlanta that fatal day in August of 1945 to accept the principalship of the A.S. Staley High School, Americas, Georgia, I would have turned my 1935 Ford around and headed toward another direction. That incident happened about 25 years ago. It was reported 10 years later. Since that time, Americas has been plagued with many violent demonstrations and bloodshed. Of course, the book has been, I might say, a stumbling block for its editor in so many ways, such as appointed positions of employment and elective offices among the educators. On several occasions, I was told that my book was controversial and probably would interfere with my usefulness as a top administrator. They were correct in their analysis of me at that time, but failed in predicting my usefulness in the future. At that time, I was only telling it like it was. Time has proven that I was correct. As conditions are today, one probably could lean towards educational research or an experimental approach. He would, in many cases, rely upon certain hypotheses. Hypotheses suggest why one event caused another or predict actions being taken. The merit of hypothesis depends upon the soundness of the theory on which it stands. Black America must not depend upon the experimentalists, philosophers, or theoretical assumptions as to moral and ethical leadership for himself and the nation. He must take a descriptive study of situations as it exists. As you know, the experimental study attempts to change the existing situation and bring about some desired state of affairs. We live in a so-called democracy. Yet a few days ago, 5 black high school students from the South told a Senate committee that old line officials had old policies are seriously hampering school desegregation. They took our language and our culture away from us 400 years, she said, and are trying to do the same thing now, said Anita Klein Peter of Providence, Louisiana. Arthur May Cohen complained that she will have to ride a school bus 60 miles each way this fall in Beaufort County, South Carolina, for her senior year in high school. On January 29, 1953, there appeared in the America's Times Recorder an article written by Davis Lee, publisher of the New York Telegram. In it, Mr. Lee expressed the view that Negroes have so much to lose they would gain if segregation in schools were ruled out. He said, I visited Albany, the capital of New York State, and learned that the city only employs 3 Negro teachers. Our own Newark, with Negroes consisting of 20% of the population, employs 2,200 teachers. But only 70 of them are Negroes, and we don't have 1 Negro principalship. He continued by saying, nowhere in these integrated states do Negroes get anywhere near proportionate representation. Every device is employed to keep qualified Negroes from being assigned. Recently, he said, a reputable New York labor union made a report on the employment of Negro teachers in New York City and charged that a systematic scheme had been adopted to exclude Negroes as teachers. He projected further that the state of Georgia would pay Negro teachers $15 million in 1953, and North Carolina would pay its Negro teachers $22 million, pouring millions annually into Negro pockets, which provide their families with money and enables them to enjoy the dignity of man, to enjoy the prestige and respectability, to buy homes and the necessity of life. 75% of the Negro teachers in the South will lose their jobs, he said. Not only that, but approximately 20,000 Negro principals will lose their jobs because of integration. The Georgia Teachers and Education Association made a study, and this study is what is being done generally in the South. And this chart reads, that in one school system in Georgia, there were 1,075 students enrolled, white students enrolled. There were 706 students. There were 55 white teachers employed and 25 black students, with a ratio of 19.5 for the white and 28.2 for black. In Grady County, Cairo, Georgia, my hometown, there were 2,448 white students enrolled, 2,181 black students enrolled. They had 127 white teachers and 65 black teachers, with a racial student enrollment of 19.3 for the white and 33.6 for the black. On the average, there is 1 white teacher employed for each 18 white students enrolled, while there is 1 black teacher employed for each 29.2 black students enrolled. The number of Negro teachers in the system studied has decreased by 27% from 742 in 1963 and 64 to 544 in 1968 and 69. This is the general practice of the type of integration that they call it. I do not call it integration, I call it outegration. The problems which confront all black Americans today are, is there a hidden agenda to divide people into hostile groups by constantly harping on controversial matters of no importance, or destroy the people's faith in their natural leaders by holding the latter up to contempt, ridicule, and obloquy? Always preach true democracy but seize power as fast and ruthlessly as possible? The Southern Regional Education Board is an organization that is interested in the best of education for all. Dr. Van S. Allen, Associate Project Director, delivered a stirring address to private black college presidents a few months ago. I would like to share a part of this with you. To begin with, he said, the Southern Regional Education Board hold that the time is ripe for powers that be that are given leadership in education to re-examine our original concept of integration in the light of what our experiences in the era have taught us since the historic school decision of 1954. We believe, he says, that this concept integration has to be re-examined because as we take another look at what was generally conceptualized as the state of affairs to be attained, integration, especially for the black educational institution and black people, meant losing as much of one's black identity as possible and becoming absorbed. We have but to examine, he says, several of the formal and regularly exposed compliments received by black who worked hard at losing their own identity and replacing it with the characteristics of the white identity. To such blacks, the compliment in white could often be heard to say, "When I'm with you, I don't think of you as a Negro, or you are not like the others, and you are a good guy. You know how to act," and etc. In each case, the unstated message has been, if you behave as I do, I will accept you. You are as good as I am, etc. If you do not behave as I do, if you do not become as I am, your value system matters. Then I will reject you. Bitter experiences in trying to fulfill this latter concept of integration have taught us that even when we have striven to be as much like our white brothers as possible, and some of us went to all kinds of extremes involving the purchasing of skin whiteners, a la Dr. Palmer, and having the nasal aspects of our anatomy systematically and soundly pinched, regularly by mothers who didn't want their children to have flat noses, and by buying all kinds of hair wigs. We believe this concept will not achieve the hope for harmonious, mutually supportive, and otherwise effective living toward together of black and white Americans, because it violates the basic need of the human organism to be. That is to say, to be of note, recognized, and accepted for oneself with all of one's natural differences. Because every human being, as well as every ethnic group, has this need to be. We find many black students in our integrated high schools and colleges clamoring for institutions in which blacks are the dominant group rather than the whites. And many blacks or predominantly white college campuses in recent times have asked for black dormitories, meeting rooms, and dining areas in the college dining room and so forth. These restrictions are in direct response to the subtle and not so subtle as well as overt acts on the part of the dominant culture to create, as the French-speaking black Africans say, a voulée, which is their expression for the white black man, or the black man who has lost his black identity through having been subjected to a white education. The young generation term this whitenized. Yet this is no great mystery to us, blacks. Our culture setting in relationship to whites has always been such that we had to understand the white mind. If I might use this expression, for us this quality is a cultural dividend. Our cultures taught us. On the other hand, our white counterpart had no way, very few cultural experiences that required them to know black people. Thus, today when the average white teacher has to confront a class of black children, there's a tendency to panic. And this panic is the same panic that all human beings experience when faced with an unknown, whether that unknown be human beings or some other unidentified force. What is the real difference between the black and white teacher in this situation? The real difference lies in the fact that black culture teachers teach the black man how to handle rejection, while the white culture does not. Rejection for blacks at the hands of whites has been one of our more common bedfellows, says he. But this has not been a common bedfellow for our white counterparts. So where we blacks are culturally advantaged, where dealing with rejection is concerned, our white counterparts are disadvantaged. And when cultures are examined in this manner, one will inevitably arrive at the conclusion that it is far more meaningful to talk about how cultures differ than is to attempt to say one is superior to the other, for where one is weak and vice versa. If we were to have an atomic catastrophe in this country today, all of our food resources, distribution machinery, electrical energy, and manufacturing capacities were destroyed, what ethnic group of people in our nation would be more likely to survive? Think about that one, and I believe you will agree with me when I say the American Indian would be the most likely to survive. Why? Because it is he who has remained closer to nature as his culture has demanded. We at the Southern Regional Education Board contend that we are a part of a pluralistic culture of society, and as such, all cultures or cultural groups have to be perceived as equals rather than superiors and inferiors. In all cases, the institutions created and utilized by both whites and blacks have tended to perpetuate the cultural heritage of each group. Our pluralistic construct for dealing with the educational problems of our society says to us at SREB, the black college has as much right to exist and serve the interests of black people and any other people who wish it as the Mormons of Brigham Young or the Catholic Notre Dame and the Jewish Brandeis University, to name a few. There's been a rumor in the country, and I attended on 3 different occasions a meeting that was called to meet the president one afternoon. I had only 5 hours to get to Washington to discuss with the black presidents of the colleges, and they decided to send a committee to Mr. Nixon. They chose the president of Howard University to represent us. Since they were talking about closing all black schools, we decided it would be a good thing at that moment to meet the problem head on. We marvel at the fact that these latter institutions are accepted without fanfare, where the question of being discriminatory or practicing segregation is raised. The contrary is almost universally true when the black or predominant black college is viewed. In recent times, the black colleges have expressed the idea of their right to be. Without failure, they have been accused of being racist and interested in promoting their own thing, as our young people would like to say. The answer to all of this is that our black colleges, and particularly all private church-related black colleges, some of which have already served this nation for more than 100 years, these colleges have over the years taken black boys and girls where they found them and successfully started them on their way to the heights of scholarly achievement. The teachers in these institutions have understood their student, his background, experiences, and his ambitions, mostly because of them have been there themselves. Today, our predominantly white colleges and universities are not rapidly learning that they are quite unprepared to take this same student and see him through as a successful educational achievement. These institutions do not have the know-how and, above all, the compassion that must be a part of doing the job. A second question would be, what colleges and universities of our nation have been the best examples of democratic education in action? Is it Harvard or Yale, Cornell or Michigan, Brandeis or Princeton? Is it the University of Alabama or Ole Miss? No, neither of these. Yet these are among our leading educational institutions of years of service, educational prestige and know-how, and regionally speaking. But it was only in very recent times that these institutions have made any effort to integrate their faculties, and this has occurred under black student duress as a rule. The black colleges such as our Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Georgia, Daniel Payne in Birmingham and Tuskegee have a tradition of integrated faculties and student bodies. Most of these colleges were open with open-door policies toward other ethnic groups, and in spite of the difficulties created by anti-integration laws in several states, these institutions have held to their principles. Ironically, it has not been the black colleges that have been discriminatory toward other ethnic groups. This has been a phenomenon of white institutions, and hence it is our black colleges that have had the most exemplary democratic educational practices. If you are searching for justification for the continued and increasing support of these colleges, tell the powers that be that America needs the predominant black college like it never has needed any institution before. Tell them that, among other things, these institutions are the best examples of democratic action that our nation has. Tell these institutions have reservoirs of accumulated knowledge for knowing with students from our black culture and disadvantaged background in general that no other institution in our nation can claim. No other institutions are innately prepared to offer black studies as are black institutions. Now, when it comes down to the black studies, you've heard so much about black studies within the black schools. We discussed that among the presidents. We discussed it with the people that are preaching black studies. But what we call as educators black studies is history and finding out the culture and background. They're not talking about that. To tell you the truth, I don't know what they're talking about. Dr. Irvin Melbo, Dean of the School of Education at the University of Southern California, says that training of teachers of the future is a critical task that must commence now. First, he obviously can't train all teachers in the same way. Second, the imperative need of the day and of our future is for teachers who will be trained as specialists in varying degrees of specialization. Our teachers of the future will be taught for service in specific environments and for instruction of pupils within known capacities and concerns. There seems to exist in the minds of America a plot to close all black institutions of higher learning. We can clearly see what is happening to the predominant black secondary schools. There are fewer black principals and a great loss of black teachers in the South. If this pattern continues in higher education, black leadership is doomed. Here are excerpts from a background paper on the traditional Negro College presented by the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education to the Special Subcommittee on Education. House of Representatives, February 25, 1970. The paper was prepared by Ellis Black, Junior of the Institute for Services to Education for the National Association for Equal Opportunity. The findings are those of the researcher. Mr. Blake finds that the black colleges are now and will be for some time into the future the most productive institutions for producing college graduates out of a largely disadvantaged racial minority. He says historically black colleges were producing college graduates when no viable alternative existed for getting black youth into and through college. The fact that these colleges are already in existence with a long history of educating the disadvantaged would be capitalized on. No other group of higher education institutions have yet proven as capable as these colleges in producing graduates from among as a disadvantaged minority. There are today 111 of these colleges. Black colleges, 88 are four-year colleges and universities, plus 2 medical colleges, Meharry, Nashville, and Howard University in Washington. Of the 4-year colleges and universities, 37 are public and 51 are private. All of the junior colleges except 6 are private. Though these schools are located in southern and border states, 49% of the 1968 entered freshmen in the 4-year colleges were from outside of the South. To better understand the complex and difficult role of these colleges, one must know the kinds of students who come to these colleges. These are the findings. The income distribution of entering students' families has a median of $3,000 with a range as follows: 18% less than $2,000 per year, 16% $2,000 to $2,999, 34% below $3,000. About a third of the mothers of these students are domestic servants and a third of the fathers laborers. 51% of the mothers and 55% of the fathers have less than a high school education. This income distribution in black colleges compares with 40% of the entering freshmen nationally, with income above $11,000. Thus, we see that 40% of the entering freshmen in predominantly white institutions are in the top 23% of families within the 65% bracket, which means to say if you should close all of the black colleges, where would these families, students get their education? And you're talking about a catastrophe, brick throwing and ball throwing. You will have it in this country. A look at a large state university, North Carolina and A&T State University, which a black presidential special assistant attended, he made the same prediction. If these schools are neglected or closed because of funding, the state and national government will be overtaxed, where the more buildings or added faculties would be needed to fill the gap. It will cause a great burden on the state. One means of assistance would be to give individual scholarships to students so that they could enter any school of their choice. Higher education is not compulsory. And speaking of leadership for the blacks, the African Methodist Episcopal Church is the best example of black leadership in the nation and the world today. Its founder was born February 14, 1760 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This month marks the 210th anniversary of his birth. Richard Allen walked out of a white church in Philadelphia and founded St. George along with Absalom Jones. In 1787, he purchased a lot of land at 6 and Lombard Streets and established what was known as a blacksmith shop in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1794, the name Bethel was adopted, and Bishop Francis Asbury of the Methodist Episcopal Church formally dedicated the edifice and later consecrated Allen as a bishop. Because of Richard Allen's determination and ambition, we have today 8 colleges organized and controlled by the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Wilberforce University, a 114-year institution, is the oldest black college in the world. Allen University, Columbia, South Carolina, 100 years old. Marshbound College, I was fortunate to graduate, is 90 years old. Daniel Payne College, Birmingham, 81 years old. Paul Wynn College, Waco, Texas, 62 years old. Everett Waters, Jacksonville, 87 years old. Shorter College, North Little Rock, 75 years. Kittrell College, North Carolina, 65 years. The ME Church has produced such leaders as W.T. Vernon, at one time Secretary of Treasury of the United States, a black man. Henry McNeil turned the first black chaplain in the United States. He also served as Postmaster General. Benjamin Banneker, a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, mathematician, was a surveyor, drew plans for the city of Washington. The church has the oldest black publication in operation today, the Christian Recorder. Bishop Daniel Payne was the founder of Wilberforce and was considered the apostle of Christian education. Daniel Payne College was named in his honor 2 years after his death. Daniel Payne College is a unique institution serving mainly the underprivileged youth of Alabama and surrounding states. We have adopted a motto. Instead of burn, baby, burn, we are saying learn, baby, learn. Our graduates are holding leading positions of great responsibility throughout the country. We're a small liberal arts four-year college, but are committed to service for humanity. Dr. A.S. Gasson, a black multimillionaire, I suppose you saw him on TV a few weeks ago, of Birmingham, is Secretary of Treasury for the entire ME Church and a trustee of Daniel Payne College. Because of the expansion of the local airport, Daniel Payne College is in transition. Our Chancellor, Bishop H.N. Robertson, and trustees have been given definite commitments by the city of Birmingham and the white community that our program of studies will not be interrupted. I had a call this morning from one outstanding white leader who is promising to give us 50 acres of land. The student government has made commitments to law and order and to cooperate with the police. There has been no violence on Daniel Payne College campus in its 80-year history, and we don't expect to have any as long as I'm its president. Now, what is this all about? It doesn't take a PhD nor a genius to see what is happening to our schools and the nation as a whole. The problem is not altogether civil rights, integration, etc. The biggest problem is troublegration among the races. For 35 years, I have been a student of the piano and organ. I tried to devise a way to perform on the piano some of the masterpieces that I learned while in college. Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat major. But today I cannot get the type of harmony and sweetness out of the compositions while trying to leave out the black or white keys. They must be used together. This society of ours, this America, and this world will never be able to get the correct harmony unless all nationalities are brought together, but not in a manner so as to lose their identity. Had it not been for the black and white teachers at Morris Brown College, Atlanta, Georgia, I no doubt will not be able to stand before you today. I am urging all black Americans to participate in any and all organizations that stand for what you stand here today in this great rally. If this government allows this kind of integration that we are experiencing today to continue, I predict, just as I did in Americus, Georgia, before all of this started, that within another decade there will be stored in the hearts and minds of blacks pressures that will explode in such a way that no gun, nor gas, nor any kind of bomb will be able to stop one of the greatest catastrophes this country has ever had. Mark my word. I say, give us back our schools so that we can train our black leadership. We must note that 70% of all four-year black graduates in this country receive their education from a black college. 85% of all PhDs receive their first degrees from black colleges. So why close all black schools anyway? May I remind you, the melon is ripening. Can we face it? I say, yes, we can face the enemy. Yes, we can stand up and face the crowd. Someone asked me since I've been here in Boston, as a black man, can you stand up for Alabama after the recent election? My reply was yes. I too can stand up for Alabama. I can stand up for Georgia and the South. I can stand up and wave the banner of love for every black child, teacher, principal, and college president. Also for black men that are giving their lives in Vietnam and Cambodia. And while holding the banner firmly close to my heart and placing it gently on the altar of sacrifice in commemoration for black men that have played a great part in helping to save this nation from Crispus Attucks' time to today. This is our country, and we know that if we allow anything or anybody to divide us and enslave us, then we are doomed together. Thank you.